Okay, now we're live. Chris, thanks for coming on. Appreciate taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started? Oh, wait, what? One sec. Accidentally didn't share audio.
Oh,
Okay, now make
all
some
right.
noise. See if that works.
Can you hear me now?
Now it should work.
How's
Okay,
that going? Okay.
go for it.
All right. So my name is Chris Howder, and I am a martial arts instructor. And not so much about my life, although I've done all kinds of cool stuff. I've had a wide range of jobs and experiences. I'm 57 and a half years old, and I'm in that early Gen Xer period where the new stuff is starting to become questionable at times with my brain. But anyways, I'm excited because I stumbled across you over a year ago, and you're one of my favorite atheists at this point. My experience with I'm what most atheists would call an agnostic atheist, but that would be the more hardcore side of atheism. In other words, I basically believe that there are natural explanations for natural phenomenon, and we humans do our best to try to impose supernatural explanations onto natural things. And so I'm not a philosophy guru like a lot of people out there, but I spent my whole life thinking about philosophy and questioning the whole God higher power thing, largely because of various experiences in my life where I was in the throes of alcoholism. And most of the things out there, the answer is God or some version of religion, which I could never really believe. I stumbled onto realizing that there was a lot more to atheism probably 6 or 7 years ago when I was instructing the author Sam Harris, which is all, of course, everyone knows him. And he and I would um, talk a lot about religion and its use and how we evolved to basically, as I think I've heard you say many times in your discussions and debates, I believe we humans have evolved through our pattern recognition software that we impose narratives and agency quite naturally. So religion is that natural. I believe if monkeys had verbal language, they would quickly have religion as well. I tend to see most things from an amateur anthropological zoological lens. And I personally am always fascinated by how we, and I include me in this, how hard it is for us not to anthropomorphize everything. And that's enough out of my intro. But actually, I was just kind of excited because even though I don't get starstruck, I'm like, wow, I get to talk to Tom Jump. And I've watched a lot of your the debates and the discussions, and I'm quite a fan of your argument style and your willingness to research And in the moment, pause and reflect and see if your interlocutor even has a point. Whereas some of the other atheists, they either immediately attack, and you tend to formulate your argument in a strategical, what I'm going to call a jujitsu way. And that what I instruct, of course, is martial arts. And the grappling arts, in essence, are almost the language. And the match is basically a debate, and there are certain things that if you do when you're grappling will cause you to lose the match. And there are certain modes of thought and patterns in which will improve your chances. And so lastly, I'll shut up because I would rather you ask me more stuff or explain things to me. But I grew up being a horrible stutterer, to a point where there's probably about 5 years where I could hardly speak a word. And it did, though, from that experience and through that, one realizes, or I realized, how critical verbal communication is with the human species. And how, when that's gone, how hard it is to get things and do things and survive. And so coming from that perspective, which of course is probably why I loved grappling, because it's non-verbal communication. And just like verbal communication, martial arts are filled with hoaxes, frauds, and magical thinking. People want to believe that they can learn some moves and it will almost be like magic, and they'll have a flying back spin kick, and just like when they play games. And so, and this goes back clearly pre-gaming. So it's definitely a part of us. And being that I've spent so many years doing reality-based martial arts as opposed to the fantasy-based entertainment arts, I reflect a lot on violence and the primal human needs. And in my industry, there's very much hierarchies, and it's an honor culture. And that ties into the ability for people to go into magical thinking and hero worship to a very strange degree, which I've observed a lot over the years.
Cool. Could you tell me some more about the fake martial arts ones? Like, what are some of your favorite examples? Like,
so
what do you think of
I've often said
Wing Chun?
Wing Chun, like almost every classical martial art, has elements in it that are true. Or maybe I shouldn't use true. That there's elements that, if you buy the premises, the conclusions are true, or are they? But and anytime if I'm using improper wording, correct it. I have no problem being corrected. As a matter of fact, I enjoy it. As an instructor, I spend a lot of time learning how to correct other humans without affecting or injuring their often huge egos. And reality martial arts, in that one sense, is very humbling. And I will send you some links. There's all kinds of, especially about 10 and 15 years ago, where an Aikido guy, a spider monkey kung fu guy will challenge either MMA guy, a jiu-jitsu guy, wrestling guy, and be literally shocked that their fake martial arts falls apart almost immediately. Whether they've spent 20 years at perfecting their one move, and we bring them on the ground, and it's quickly over. And some of them will say, wow, I've been practicing a bunch of bullshit and now I want to learn reality arts. And others will reject it and continue to push their fraud. Now, the other issue that I've had is I don't necessarily think there's anything inherently wrong with teaching a fake martial art as like in the same way one would teach ballet or jazz dance. The only problem comes because often the instructor is implying that this martial art will work in live reality combat, and it quickly falls apart.
For sure. So which ones are the fake ones and which ones are the real ones? Because I remember seeing there was a Chinese mixed martial artist who was going around challenging all the Chinese masters of the whatever the different Chinese versions are, and completely destroyed them. And it was hilarious because he was only like a mid-range mixed martial artist.
Yeah, I've watched those too. So again, it's like all of these fake martial arts all have elements in there that when isolated could be a truism. But the weird thing that happens in martial arts culture, largely because it's an honor culture and the hierarchies, is unlike other sports like basketball, baseball, there's not this yielding to this almost mythical higher power that if you can just learn from master so-and-so, you will somehow inherently have the knowledge. And martial arts often works in the hierarchy of a pyramid. And the main instructor or the grand master is placed on the top of that pyramid. And by structure and implication, one feels like they could never achieve that level of the master. Whereas in like other sports, the coach doesn't have to be the best player in the world because his job is a coach. And somehow in martial arts, people would get into a trap that is a direct result of hierarchical honor cultures, which you don't have in other sports. And that is part of one of the reasons why I theorize that it's harder to break out of it. Much like if you're leaving a religion, the pressure to not leave is tremendous.
Well, like name the fake ones.
Okay. So Aikido is probably one of it's a great philosophy to apply to reality arts, but is the most horrible martial art out there. Let's see, most of the Kung Fu styles are absolutely abysmal. Then you have the ones that kind of straddle the line, like Taekwondo and point karate. It's like pretending it's real, and there is actual real aliveness against real resistance, but it's not quite there yet. Kind of like a Catholic who believes in evolution, but still is clinging on to this mystical, magical BS. So like everything, yes, it has a spectrum. And I find that spectrum to be absolutely fascinating because I question, do I have an element of that? Is there part of the way I think that is still yearning for the quote unquote magic? Now, I would largely say to self-assess myself, and I'm sure from what others think, I've long since 20 years plus abandoned that. But I still run into, while I instruct, people that are still clinging on to aspects that are just the pure bullshit. Hey, shush, puppy. I've got a loud dog too, who has a lot of fear, and fear is generally the bait that draws people into martial arts, be they reality-based arts or the fake martial arts. And fear is obviously a very powerful drive based upon our evolution, and we are pack animals. And one of the worst things that can happen to a human is to be cast out, shamed out of a tribe or a pack. So we have evolved to be able to put up with all kinds of abuse in order to not leave the pack. It's wired in us. And for most martial artists that have left the fake arts, they have left often by the same fear. They just fear, oh, wow, this is now a more powerful art, so I got to leave my weak tribe and join a stronger tribe. So oftentimes the hierarchy and structure remains. And I don't know if that's a good structure or a bad. I'm trying not to place a value on it, but it's definitely an observable phenomenon within reality arts and the BS ones.
Well, could you talk about like why are fake martial arts popular? Why do the people think they work, and why don't they work? What is it that makes them less successful than MMA?
Well, okay, so there's no way that you can say that martial arts are just a technology and knowledge. There's also the athletics involved. And those who are insecure about their athletic prowess are going to quickly find out in the reality arts that it takes months and years to improve, rather than in one class you are shown some move and you think it'll work. So the allure to find a gem of knowledge that will suddenly work very well is a strong drive. And the fact is, like learning a language, it takes years to get good at it. And whereas you join the Chuck's American Karate School, you're going to get a reward almost every class that says, wow, you just learned these highly effective skills. Now you're tough and strong. Almost like when you're playing a game and you can quickly add a skill level. That's often the way it's instructed, whereas that's not the reality of learning any sport. It takes practice, and it takes hours of it, and days and weeks and years. And there's a lot of stick and less carrot. There's probably way more stick and not a lot of carrot. And the fake martial arts bring you lots of carrots, and they use the stick to impose their not real bullshit. If that made any sense.
But I meant, like, technically, what are the technical differences between a successful martial arts and a non-successful martial arts?
So let me use this analogy. Let's say you were going to go learn how to play the game of basketball, and you were at Chuck's basketball school, and you're there for 3 years, and you never actually played a game. You learned how to bounce the ball around, how to shoot hoops from the 3-pointer line, but you never actually played against another player who's really trying to win. And then you have the reality schools, you're instantly playing the game. So that would be an example of the methodology is most fake martial arts have very little controlled sparring or none at all. So the experiments are never completed. So the fake ones spend all their hours in theory of the hypothetical. This is how it would work if the real punch came. And if you're fast enough, you'll block that real punch. And you'll practice this for hours, but the real punches come and it's more than one, or they maneuver around. And so as an untrained, I often have in my mind an experiment. And when I instruct, I'll say, let's say I'm going to train the Tom jump. And as an experiment, we're going to clone Tom. We'll clone 3 of him. And we will train one in Kung Fu, Aikido, done the classical old school way. We'll train one in just the art of kickboxing, and one in a grappling art only. You can guarantee that the one who does the traditional arts will lose in that up and upcoming match, whether it's a month away, a year away, or 20 away. So when I teach, I approach it is in, God, I'm not wording myself very well at all, but ask me more questions, because maybe it'll come out. If
well, like what are the skills that they teach you, and why don't those skills work?
Because there's a lack of real aggression and the chaos of a real fight. So martial arts, in essence, is an attempt to make order out of the chaos of a real fight. And you can pretend that you're making order and show things, but in order to actually see if it works, you have to fight. And a lot of humans don't want to risk the injury involved in actually having to test it. So it's, in some ways, the fake martial arts will show you things in order to avoid injury. But that only builds the fear of the unknown. So when you take someone who's never swam in a pool, the water is scary, and you throw them in a pool, your instinctual reaction is everything gets really tight, and you move extremities around, and you windmill and spend a lot of energy, then you sink and drown. Once you learn how to swim, you learn it's literally the opposite. You relax, you move slow, you breathe slow, you relax your hips. Wow, I can float now. And then I learn how to swim and how to move across the water. I learn how to hold my breath and relax underwater and come up slow. Whereas the non-swimmer will react in a very chaotic, overexerted ways. So the fake martial arts, then, you never get a chance to really swim. But they're going to tell you all these things that if you ever end up thrown in a pool, wiggle your feet like this or move your hands in a way that, but you never get the test, if that makes any sense.
Well, sure, that makes sense in practice. Like, just learning theory, like in religious apologetics, doesn't do anything because you don't have anything in practice, for sure. But like if you learn theory of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or something,
yes,
that's still going to be better than learning theory of Wing Chun. So
I believe so, yes.
So what is the difference in the methodologies of the mixed martial arts that makes one successful and one not successful?
So it would be what you could basically call aliveness, real energy, real resistance and your opponent has an equal intent to win. And so in this laboratory, eventually out of that, through generational learning, you will end up with the reality arts. And like all evolution, you change the environment, you change the art. So when we impose man-made rules on the game, such as you aren't allowed to headbutt, then the whole game actually changes, because you now, whether you're in a guard on top, you don't have to hold on to your opponent's head anymore. So wrestling and judo, as wonderful arts as they are, and sport, jiu-jitsu, because you can't hit, you can perfect the areas of grappling that would never be able to be perfected if you always added strikes, or if you always said, I can poke you in the eyes. No human would last long enough in order to learn how to avoid being hit in the eyes. So it's reality arts work basically on the principle is, I have a hypothesis that if I hold your arm and neck in this way, you will have a harder time escaping than if I hold your arm and neck in that way. Let's test it. So you're constantly in the laboratory testing whether it works or not. Even if you are an unwilling magical thinker, if you remain in that environment long enough, it will change the way you fight. And if you change those parameters by adding either sport rules or cultural rules, you will change how the art manifests over time.
Okay, can you give some more examples of like fake ones? What are some, like what's the energy ones that they can hit you without actually touching you?
Yes, there's a lot of those. There's a Russian one, Sistema it's called, and it's pure bullshit. Those are basically the uke, or the a partner is a willing participant in the act, and once that uke becomes unwilling, that those martial arts, of course, they fall apart instantly. And what is fascinating to those of us in the reality arts, which we thought, 20 years ago after UFC, it would be just a matter of years and it would completely wipe out all those BS arts. They'll have to close their schools down, but it hasn't. Just like one would think that after the origin of species came out, one would think that within a generation or two, the answers would be obvious, that as a result of this, we now understand more about us. And of course, never underestimate human resistance to cling on to an ideology, regardless of what it is. I would say, as an example, like politics are almost like the new ideology. And if that ideology rewards bad behavior, lying, BS, then it's going to persist. And the fake martial arts are rewarding the lie. by giving praise and adulation to those who do it.
We got a super chat from Dean. He asked, what parts of karate are ineffective? Styles like, can you read the chat? Oh, no, you can't because it's on
I
different.
Can't, but that's all right. Read it off.
Styles like Kyokushin seem to have the real fights to knockout. Where does it differ from reality groundwork? Question mark.
All right, so let's try to unpack that. So let's say you have a totally fake martial art that based on the hierarchy of your culture and the honor thing, it's been passed down over years, and it's a classical karate style, and you never really spar, allowing no rules at all. You make it a cultural rule that upon a clinch, we stop the match and we break it apart and we re-begin again, only standing. You're already having an environment that will evolve in a direction. So, but let's say that because 10 years ago, the instructor watched UFC, and just by watching it, he saw, God, my karate might not work. And then he begins slightly adjusting his moves, finding that he can make his Hoyosho move work. He will start to believe, much like how the Catholic Church will adopt evolution, but it never really changes its core epistemology at approaching how it believed in evolution. It just added it because it was no longer viable for that system, martial arts or religion, to persist in the fraud or in the BS. I don't know if I answered that well enough.
So you're saying that these other martial arts added in traits from the successful ones,
yes,
but were at core just unsuccessful things that modified?
Yes, that is precisely what I meant, and I should have worded it as well as you did, Tom.
All right. Another question from Vlad. He asks, Christopher, how many accolades have you won in popular tournaments?
I've won several Masters World Championships. I've won super fights. I have fought more than most who practice, but not as much as some. I'm Conor McGregor's great grand coach. I have, I think, 62 the black belts under me in the hierarchy of this thing, because it's a hierarchy. And I've sparred a lot of, just because I'm not into that whole name dropping thing, but I was there in the early days and worked with Randy Couture and BJ Penn before he became the cool BJ Penn. And so I've got a lot of experience with, and including last week, I was sparring with the current IBJJF lightweight champion, who of course mops me up, but I can last and I could hold up, but I'm old, and youth is a critical aspect of it, which another thing that the fake arts have is, because of the hierarchy, we have the image of the little old man grandmaster who can destroy all these young athletic guys, and that just isn't true. Size does matter, youth does matter, and being fit matters. So regardless of your knowledge base and skills, there is an element that is your body. So as an imagination experiment, let's say you took the greatest ballerina and you aged them rapidly overnight to be 80 years old. I promise you they could no longer perform this art, even though the knowledge and the the hindbrain interconnections works. It's like the old guy you often hear all the time, and I say all the time when I instruct, it's like, God, when I was younger, I could grab that and move my arm over here. And now it hurts my shoulder and I'm slower on the mat. Usually around the time you're about 40 to 45, you start this weird phase in where you're over here and God, that guy's so fast, and you think it's you they're speaking about, and it's not anymore. It's the younger, newer guy. And I will often say, as an aging martial artist, because of experience, occasional controlled adrenaline bumps, I've got one good one left in me no matter what, but I probably only have one. But kind of why the old lion who's kind of limping across the thing, any of the young ones can kick his ass, but they know it's going to be one hell of a fight. And that's kind of why the old lion exists as an analogy. And usually when we age, we begin much more the role of being a coach. And so last point, and then I will shut my mouth, because I instruct all the time, I talk a lot, but because you get to a point where athletics no longer works, you get to delve deep into the art and improve just minor amounts of adjustments of your hips, your head, your range, your base, your balance, and your art suddenly improves. So the knowledge part of martial arts is limitless, but you must carry that knowledge through a vehicle being your body. And I don't know if I answered that, but that's.
Yeah, I think the question was, what accolades have you won? So you got
oh boy, did I go off on a rant.
Yeah. Is there any, can people like check your stats on a website somewhere? Is that a thing?
Yes. If you put my name in the internet, CHRASHAUETER, Hotel Alpha Uniform Echo Tango Echo Romeo, my last name, on a search, you'll see who my internet, the internet me will appear.
Cool. I don't know, what other thoughts do you have on martial arts?
Let's get off martial arts. Jeez. So last night I watched one of your more recent ones where you were debating a Muslim if Islam was true. And
which one was that? The which dumpster fire are you referring to?
Oh God, yes, it was the guy who was very nice and kept implying that you had no patience, and if you went to Islam, you would suddenly gain the enlightenment of the patience, in which he clearly could pretend that he had.
Yeah, the guy last night, that one was yes. Interesting. Who didn't know what a valid meant or what truth meant.
Yes, meant. He didn't even understand. But he was right, because a synonym isn't exactly what it. And that's precisely what happens in these fake martial arts. The kung fu guy will keep insisting that one little part worked, therefore my whole argument works, my whole art works. And whereas it would be much easier to humble yourself, see if you might be wrong. Is there a novel, testable way in which we can see if this way to punch works or not? And there is, and it seems so easy, yet we humans persist in not doing the scientific method. It seems to be, it's astonishing to me, like absolutely astonishing, the persistence that we humans, and I hope I'm not included, will pursue down such fallacious lines of reasoning yet cling on it. And like you mentioned earlier, I mean, we humans are rewarded for lying all the time. You're rewarded often all the way to the White House for lying. And so, I mean, I understand the model of where and why, because there's a big carrot and no stick. You're going to keep chasing the carrot. And martial arts schools are often structured where it's all carrots and no sticks. But they'll tell you the stick is, if you leave my school, you will lose the fight. Much like if you leave the religion, you will be cast into hell or whatever it is.
For sure. I think that's a part of human nature, actually, like a bug, not a feature, or a feature,
Yes.
not a bug, where
Yes.
people will try a diversity of things because that's how evolution experiments. And so people will go down roads that are very unsuccessful and continue going down those roads because it's what helps test different ideas. And so the fact that people will get obsessed with certain ideas and continue to follow them no matter what, and keep trying to make them work no matter what, is
Right.
how evolution tests things.
And because evolution works via the groups and the populations, it's almost like we have a hard time not pulling ourselves out of the evolving group. And it's like, as you know, it's very common that people look at evolution from a self-centered ego way as well, thinking that I evolve rather than populations evolve. And in essence, you could make that analogy that, you know, I'm an individual who has evolved the way in which I do the jujitsu now, or whatever it is. But really, there's an underlying current of population group dynamics that is evolving, and subconsciously that will affect you no matter what, which is why I think people like you and I want to debate and discuss this stuff with others, because there's some also human thing where I'll be honest about me. I want to change the way the group, the populations think, because I'm worried that my children will grow up in an authoritarian theocracy, or we will lose control of technology to a point where we will fucking doom ourselves as a species. The Fermi paradox, right? So that's why I have interest. It looked like it's often asked, like, why do you care if evangelicals are so stubborn? Because those evangelicals will affect the larger group as a whole. And I don't want my grandkids to be told or to be not allowed to learn about evolution or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, well, for me, it's a job. I don't actually like talking to people. I do it for work.
Yes. So I didn't hear it, but I saw one of your things. I think, like I too, of course, because I grew up a stutterer, I went through brutal alcoholism and opiate addiction, and had to get out of that without having a quote unquote higher power or religion. And I had to find, and I'm going to use the word spiritual only to mean the opposite of material. I had to find a spiritual / mental model to get out of the throes of not being able to control my own impulsive behavior, which was going to kill me. I like to say often as a joke, I was in to OxyContin before it got so popular. And so most addicts and alcoholics, most recover through faith and giving your will over to a higher power. And it works in a sense, right? So that's where, again, I often say prayer works because you believe it works. So in essence, you're self-hypnotizing to escape bad behavior, and then you're attributing that to an outside intelligent agency. And it becomes frightening if you were raised to believe that there is this outside agency that's watching over you like a parent. And every time you drink too much and lie and all these things, you feel terrible because God's shaking his head, looking down upon you like you're doing bad behavior. And you're screaming, God, I can't stop. I can't stop. And you can't stop because there isn't anything there, but you have to convince yourself that there is something there so you can gain the internal strength to stop the bad behavior. So many addicts and alcoholics go through this vicious cycle of believing I am forsaken, or whatever it is. And in order for me to escape those throes, I had to not believe in any higher power, but I did have to let go of my resentments towards religion. I had to cease the anger part and cease the resentment part that led me to reject those who believed, who were trying to help me. It's like almost like you're in a corner now, and if you better believe in God or I'm going to blow your head off, you say, okay, I will fucking fake. I believe so much that I will almost sort of believe. And because I'm spending days, months, and weeks faking it, I suddenly realize I haven't used alcohol or drugs now, and I'm escaping it. So then you can say, oh, it was a higher power. It was God. And it's like, I don't want to, as much as I love discussing religion with the religious, if it means their life or a grieving a parent, I don't want to convince them that their comfort in which they find in religion isn't real. So I came to a place in my atheism where, just like in martial arts, except in martial arts, I often say, me trying to convince the Aikido guy that his martial art won't work, the stakes couldn't be so low. It's so less important than, I think, other huge issues, because the fact is, most the time males engage in combat with each other. It's a duel. It's by choice. I think most time in modern culture, most humans, let alone youthful males, can avoid physical conflict using language and words. And maybe what attracted me as a kid, because I could barely get 3 words out with fucking out stuttering, that might have been what drew me into martial arts.
Got a few more questions from the audience.
Yes.
Roblox asked, would it be fair for a kickboxer to consider grappling to be a fake art? In a real world scenario, the last place you would want to be is rolling around on the ground with someone whilst their friends are stomping the heck out of you.
Yes, and I have much experience with that. As I said, there's years ago, for a brief period of time, I was a cop. And the reality is this: the hardest guy to grab hold of and bring down on the ground is a grappler, not a boxer. And because martial arts are again, reality arts are the attempts to make order out of a chaos. It's controlling your opponent and controlling the range of the battle. So as a grappler, if I don't want you to bring me on the ground, I can pretty much be assured that I have a better chance of remaining on my feet than the guy without grappling skills.
Well, I think he's asking, grappling seems to have less real world application than long range fighting styles like kickboxing, because in a real world scenario, it's usually not one on one. They have a group of people, and so you got to
Yes,
keep your distance.
that's very, very true. And again, if you are a grappler who wants to escape getting your ass kicked by three guys, if they're going to have a lot harder time dragging you and bringing you on the ground to drop kick your head than if you aren't a grappler. So
Gotcha. That makes sense. So you're like saying if you have training in grappling, it'll make it harder for other people to bring you down in those situations.
yes, yes.
Gotcha.
And as an ex-cop and as a full spectrum mixed martial artist who's done Muay Thai, boxing for years and everything, yes, the martial arts, the two arts which own the clinch. If you think of the combat, if you break it apart in, there's the stand-up range where you punch, kick, knee, and elbow. Then there's the clinch range where it's whoever can break the clinch or bring it on the ground, and then the grappling arts. The two main clinch arts are judo with cloth and Greco-Roman without a cloth. And there's an adage in amongst the Greco judo guys, which I also do, is he who controls the clinch controls whether it goes on the ground or remains standing.
Gotcha. Next question from Jib. Jib asks, I'm curious on both you and Chris's opinion on Choi Li Fut Kung Fu, as it's more modern, has daily sparring plus 52 weapons in the system officially.
I remember 20 or 30 years ago when I was a purple belt, then in jiu-jitsu before UFC 1, and we were arranging a fight, a sparring match between me and this a guy who said, I know the 52 styles of the Jeet Kune Do and the Kung Fu and all. Almost every time I hear a number, I can already know it's culturally structured in a way to sell you bullshit. Because the bigger the number sounds like it's a more powerful martial art. In the reality arts, it's better to be really skilled at one or two things than know 100 stupid things. And the refinement of reality arts becomes crystal clear in the laboratory of a fight or in less controlled sparring.
Gotcha. Eves asks, is it our job as martial artists to point out these fake martial arts artists, like what happened to George Dillman all the time?
You know, I know it's not my job. My job is to teach and show and continue to learn what I have found works. And if you want to learn what works, welcome aboard. And if you want to not learn it, go and not learn it. If you want to challenge it, then let's arrange a way in which we can conduct that experiment. And let's analyze what rules in this sparring thing we will allow or not. And in the olden days, in the challenge days, pre-internet world, there would basically be backyard or garage or close the school and pull the wind shades. Let's spar and see what works. And that's kind of in many ways an icky aspect of martial arts. Is it comes from a culture of dueling. We are dueling, and human males throughout history, through almost all cultures, have some form in which they settle arguments. Or when Tom Jump just beat my logic so bad, I'm so fucking mad, I want to solve it now by sparring. I challenge you to a duel, right? Because we humans, especially human males, are easily insulted. And we are threatened when our beliefs are challenged, which is why things like religion and politics become so heated, because it's such a core of who your outer consciousness identifies with your whatever you think your inner you is. You've created a feedback loop that becomes your identity, who you think you are. And when someone attempts to shatter that, even just by overhearing evolution is true and you are a young earth creationist, you will feel an emotional reaction because it's jarring that loop. And martial arts and learning is much the same way, whereas Tom practices the art of not allowing
the way of the chair
to affect your argument. We practice not allowing emotions to affect our physical fight.
I'm going to call my method the way of the chair.
The way of the chair. Well, as they've said many times, the pen is mightier than the sword, and that is clearly true. And the longer we humans evolved, the better language became. Even the less athletic caveman, the one who could articulate and become a leader and get the younger, more athletic ones to intercept the antelope that would surely outrun us, but we'll trick him into running into our trap. So language is part of all warfare and combat. It's just less important when it comes to one-on-one conflict.
And last question from Eves. Can you ask him if he sees a trend in MMA clubs that they tend to be getting more and more religious?
Yes, that is a fascinating thing. So not to insult any of my own guys who are under me, I teach a lot of guys who are very religious. And I frequently have non-public but debates with them because they, of course, and bless their hearts, are trying to evangelize me because they genuinely don't want me to end up in hell, because that sounds like an awful place for an awfully long fucking time, eternity. So bless their hearts for trying to save my soul. And when the religious type approaches me with that genuine altruistic attempt because they care about me, I find it that I don't want to create an argument where there need not be, or an emotional reaction. I don't want to let that affect my ego the way the religious is affected when someone challenges their core beliefs. So, like I say, I instruct a lot of very religious people, and I've instructed many fellow atheists, including Sam Harris years ago. And I approach other religions much the way Sam Harris does, where I'm willing to discuss and debate anything. And I encourage you to have as open mind as I do, because I will have to yours. Just real quick. So years ago, maybe 30 years ago, my roommates found Jesus, and were going to Biola College to become ministers. And one of them is now, and him and I are still friends. We are still friends. He likes a Trump, I don't. But we are still friends. And we would have these lengthy discussions and about this stuff. And I could never get past, and still can't, the argument of evil. That's just something that no matter how you want to spin this God or religion thing, no matter what religion it is, I have yet to hear an argument that I can buy that answers the argument of evil. Otherwise, you have a limited God, and then it just the whole thing just quickly. But anyhow, wait, what was the question again? So he challenged me because I would claim I'm open-minded. He said, I challenge you then for 1 week, every morning and every night, get down on your knees and pray to ask for, but Jesus, if you are real, reveal yourself to me in a way that is undeniable and true. And I gave it my best shot for more than a week. I really did try. And I kept not hearing anything or seeing anything that my logic part of my brain couldn't see as just nature or a pattern. And I've tried on LSD. I've really, really tried, and I will continue to. That's why I say I'm an agnostic atheist, meaning that I'm going to give 1% chance that maybe I am completely full of shit. I'm a brain in a vat, the Matrix, whatever it is. Because as soon as I conclude I am 100% sure there is no God, I have now entered the realm of ignorance as well.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we've been going for over an hour. It was a great conversation. Also, if you happen to know any ring girls that you could introduce me to, that would be great. I need a girlfriend.
And
desperately.
Tom,
I would do it. I would fly down tomorrow. I would do it 100%.
I personally think that you would love the jiu-jitsu. And
well, I've done it. So I've taken several different classes here, but for me, not enough hot blondes. That's kind of like, I need hot blondes to be happy. Everything else is boring.
Understood. And again, guys out there in internet land, but Tom Jump currently is my favorite atheist. I don't have heroes either. I've heard him say he has no heroes. I don't have heroes. I have humans which I admire various aspects of their lives, but I do not believe in idolatry, which is having a hero. That would be what the Christians and Muslims would call idolatry, I believe. But Tom, keep up the great work. And one day, if and when you do run for office, please look me up, and I will do whatever I can to help you on that path.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Also, I'm 100% serious about the ring girls. I definitely would. That would make me sufficiently happy. All right.
I will message you offline, so you don't have to say where you live.
Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm open about this. Open to anybody. Anybody introduce me to Instagram models. I'm in desperate need of this because that's like the one thing that makes me happy. I'm happy to tell people where I live. It doesn't make a difference.
Right on.
All right. Thanks again. Do you want to give any links or references where people can find out more about your work?
Combatbase1word.com is my website. Combatbase.com. My Instagram is Combat Base 96, I think, or Chris Howder Art. I have like 3 or 4 Instagrams. I personally have, like with a lot of things, a love-hate relationship with the internet. I think it's the greatest thing that ever happened and the worst thing that ever happened. Kind of like European colonization, the worst thing that ever happened and the best thing that ever happened. But Donald Trump might be, because of what we learned from this experience we've had, this trauma, might be the greatest thing that has happened in half a century. Or it might be the worst thing as we fall into authoritarian dystopian fascism. Who knows? But I wish you all out in internet land to have a wonderful thing. Keep your eyes on the Tom Jump YouTube channel, because they really are some of the greatest discussions and the debates. I didn't get a chance to ask you about one of my favorite ones, that Darth fucking Dawkins and the pre-sup argument. I will admit, when I first heard it 20 some years ago, for a brief period of time, it almost had me. It almost had me. I think it's of all the religions or religious arguments, it's one of the trickiest to find the God of the gaps errors in it. But yeah, I loved when you destroyed the Darth.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you're right that it's very interesting, the linguistics that they construct around their ideology to make it hard to deal with those arguments in such a way that it's clear, understand what they're saying and why it's wrong.
Yes.
I kind of find it fun because of that. It's an interesting little like puzzle box of
total puzzle box, because it does sound very logical. And then it always then, like, whenever you ask a pre-sup if they're a young earth creationist, of course that they always are. And because part of them knows that that's a bunch of shit, because if you're smart enough to understand the pre-sup argument, part of you knows that your young earth is a bunch of bullshit. So they really compartmentalize that off to stick with that verbal trick, which is the jujitsu. It actually is brilliant verbal, the jujitsu. And again, one of the reasons why I'm your fan is because you conduct yourself in that argument the way a good martial artist but dissects his opponent.
Awesome. Well, we're getting a lot of comments saying they really appreciate you. You're an awesome guest to have on. Would like to see you debate somebody on like mixed martial arts. Have a argument jujitsu about which ones are fake jujitsus. That would be hilarious.
I would really enjoy it. Of course, any of you guys, you could look up on the internet just by putting in fake martial arts and see all kinds of examples of just much like religion, and yet they persist, which is why I'm an existentialist in the blues, because I have little faith that our biological evolution will ever, our technological spike has gone so far without our biology and culture matching it that maybe we are doomed. So that's why I'm out here speaking, because I'm hoping that my great-grandchildren can exist. And I believe that when somebody on the radical religious side gets a hold of, in 20 years, being able to 3D print Ebola or whatever it is, we are going to be in an awful place in this world.
3D print Ebola. What a wonderful thing to
have the conversation
on. But
dreary.
You know, well, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it. I'm going to get some coffee because I got to get another show in like 30 minutes. So great again having you on.
You're awesome, Tom. Thanks.
Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.